I'm happy that Canada is multicultural, multi-ethnic country. Here, you have the freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of whatever you like. I do enjoy whenever I come.
An incredible sight in Bonn this afternoon as a Muslim spiritual leader arrived to begin
represents
a
is small in terms of Islam, but extremely active and full of missionary zeal. Something that doesn't always go over well with fellow Muslims. Here's my conversation with the Caliph.
Hazrat was staying in Peace Village, and there was a lot of joy and festivity and love in the environment. People were from all over Canada were visiting the area, and they were gathered outside the residence of Hazur, and Hazur used to come out to go to mosque. It was about 100 yards away from the house where he was staying.
I remember very clearly there was one guy with his two sons who in the freezing cold, he found a place near the mosques. Normally, you probably saw in the video, large crowds of people where Hazur was walking. But then there's some steps that Hazur goes down, and most people thought, okay, Hazur's going to go in the mosque. There's no point of being there. But this gentleman, he with his two sons would stand on the hill, and every single day he would stand there before Hazur would go in the mosque with his two kids, and his kid every day would say, Assalamu alaikum, really loud, and he would say it in a particular tone. So after a little while, Hazur started noticing that the same people in the same tone, eventually they got Hazur's attention. And Hazur would wave back and say salam. Then what they would do is that after namaz, they would again go to a certain place they found near Hazur's residence where there was not that many people again. So while there was huge crowds, these people found a unique place. Again, in that unique tone, the boy would say, Assalamu alaikum Hazur. And one day, Hazur went up to them. And Hazur said to them that, do you just stand here after namaz, or do you actually say the prayer? Hazur said it very lovingly. And Hazur said, no, Hazur, we do namaz.
एक नबीना शख्स थे, वो हमेशा मस्जिद में शुरू में आकर दूसरी सफ़ में या उनको मौका मिलता था तो बैठ जाया करते थे. तो किसी ने उनसे पूछा, जो साथ वाले शख्स ने, कि आपका नज़र तो नहीं आता, हुज़ूर को तो आप नहीं देख सकते, तो आप इतना वक्त पहले आके जगह तलाश करके दूसरी सफ़ में बैठते हैं, जिसको साथ लाते हैं, उसको कहते हैं मुझे दूसरी सफ़ में बैठाओ और उस जगह बैठाओ जहाँ हुज़ूर सामने हुज़ूर की नज़र पड़ती हो. तो आप क्या मतलब आपके दिल में क्या है? वो कहते हैं कि मैं सिर्फ इसलिए आता हूँ और दूसरी सफ़ में उस जगह बैठता हूँ जहाँ हुज़ूर की नज़र मुमन पड़ती है कि मैं तो हुज़ूर को नहीं देख सकता, लेकिन काश हुज़ूर मुझे देख ले. तो ये इतना उनका था, और रोते जाते थे, कहते मैं इसलिए बैठता हूँ कि काश हुज़ूर मुझे देख ले. तो फिर वो पूछते थे दाएं बाएं, जब वो नमाज से फारिग होते थे, कि हुज़ूर ने देखा है, हुज़ूर ने देखा मुझे, हुज़ूर ने तो नज़र उठाई है. तो वो कहते थे हाँ, हुज़ूर जब भी तशरीफ़ लाते हैं तो उस वक़्त भी देखते हैं सबको, जब नमाज पढ़ा के वापस जाते हैं फिर भी देखते हैं. तो हुज़ूर ने आपको देखा है, फिक्र ना करें.
I remember during the Peace Village part of the tour, there was a period of time which was extremely busy. Hazur's schedule was relentless from morning to evening. Early morning it would start, and then they would continue all day with mulaqats, with meetings, with interviews, and many other activities, classes. After that period of 8 or 9 days came to an end, one day Hazur looked at me and saw me, and he said that over the past 8 or 9 days, I was extremely unwell. I had a very, very severe fever, and I felt extremely unwell. But you would never have guessed, would you? And I said that, yes, I wouldn't, because Hazur's activities were completely the same. And he never took a break for a moment. And I said to Hazur, I said that, why didn't you take some rest? And Hazur said, I have to do my Jamaat duty. That is my priority. My health, these things, it doesn't matter.
I remember I was going up in the lift or elevator once, or going down, This is from where Hazur was doing mulaqat. So I'd taken some interviews and I was going down to go back to where I was staying to pick something up. And there was a boy in the lift or elevator and he was looking a bit disappointed. And I asked him, what's the issue? He said, I just went up to get a mulaqat and they told me I'm 1,700th in the queue.
During those 6 weeks, Hazur met over 1,300 MD families in personal mulaqat. And this is apart from all his other meetings and his addresses and his functions. And in those mulaqat, he met over 6,000 MDs. So if you work it out, it equates to around 1,000 MDs every single week just in these personal mulaqats.
The highlight of the Canadian tour for me was probably the Jalsa Salana. All Jalsa Salanas have their own unique special moments, but this one was particularly significant for me and quite emotional to see so many Arabs who recently arrived from Syria to join for the first time in a Jalsa Salana that Khalifat al-Masih Ayyadahullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz is attending. Seeing their prayers fulfilled, seeing their emotions, seeing their reactions was quite heart-touching.
مسرور فلاذوا بحبل الله صاروا مؤمنين تراه بساحة الهيجا كليث ومقداما يخيف الناقين.
Canada's largest newspaper, the national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, reached out to us a few days prior to Hazur's arrival and explicitly asked to be the very first media outlet to interview Hazur. So much so that they wanted to do it on the same day that Hazur arrived to Toronto. However, the newspaper later decided that they were unable to go ahead with this interview and gave us the impression that they felt that the story wasn't compelling enough for them. Despite our several attempts, they chose not to do or engage us further for an interview. However, during Jalsa Salana Canada, our team received a call from the same newspaper. And they said, we're looking to do a story about Thanksgiving, about a Syrian family. And we're following that Syrian family for a few days. And we've already done the first part of their story. And now we want to do a story about where they're celebrating their Thanksgiving. And they gave us your number and said that they are attending a convention today. So we are wondering if we can come and cover that convention. When the reporter and the cameraman came to the convention, it was indeed Jalsa Salana Canada. And the lunch that they were going to have on Thanksgiving Day was a reception with Hazur Anwar Ayyadahullah bin Nasr al-Aziz. In this and through this, the Globe and Mail ran a beautiful story about this family and how the most precious moment and the thing that they were the most thankful for was this lunch that they got to have with their beloved Imam.
Before the tour, one of our senior office bearers in Canada had suggested to the local media, to the Jamaat media team, that why don't we try and do an interview with Peter Mansbridge, who is regarded as the most senior Canadian journalist, perhaps in history, certainly in this era, and he is considered as the voice of Canada. And at the time, it was a bit of an offhand comment. However, and the Jamaat did reach out to them, but they didn't hear anything, or certainly nothing positive. But then, as Hazur's tour started, and suddenly there was this wave of media activity, and from the very first day of Hazur's arrival in Canada, there was the media who were there to greet him, and then in the following days there was interviews. After a few days, the producers at Peter Mansbridge reached out to the Jamaat again and themselves said that we want to do an interview with His Holiness.
There was an enthusiastic interest among all media outlets. So much so that various different media outlets wanted exclusivity, wanted to do something bigger and better and more special
than the next media outlet. Among them, indeed, was the largest broadcaster in the country, CBC, and CBC News chief correspondent, Peter Mansbridge, a person who has had a very celebrated career and is recognized throughout the world for his journalism. What was particularly unique is this most accomplished journalist in the country is also retiring this year. And we knew that this would be the last and final opportunity to help set up such an interview.
However, they also had one request which we agreed to, and that was that during the period from the time of the interview until it was broadcast, which was a period of 2 weeks, that there should be no one-on-one interviews with Hazur that are broadcast elsewhere in Canada. They wanted exclusivity for that period. We sought Hazur's guidance about this, and Hazur said that we can give this permission. However, during that time, even those 2 weeks, we got many, many requests for interviews. And some of them we were able to do on the proviso that they would show the interviews after the Peter Mansbridge interview aired. However, when it came to the day of Hazur's address in York University, which was just a day before Peter Mansbridge was airing, we got a call from the Bell Network media, which is the biggest private network in Canada, and their media team, and they requested that after the York University address that day, they would like to interview Hazur. So our media team, our media representative said to them that, yes, of course, you can come and we'll arrange an interview, but on the condition that you broadcast after Peter Mansbridge. And perhaps they were in some sort of competition. They were very determined that we want to broadcast it tonight, but we politely declined. About half an hour later, the vice president of Bell phoned up our media representative personally himself, which was quite unprecedented. And he said, we have 3 national networks under the Bell News Agency, under the Bell Media Group. And we will show His Holiness's address live on all 3 networks tonight, if you give us that exclusive interview which we can air tonight. And it was quite an amazing offer, and certainly would have been an incredible way for the Jamaat's teachings to be spread across Canada, and Hazur's address was, mashallah, wonderful. However, we have to honour our pledges and fulfill our trusts.
Yes, it seems Muslim world is disturbed, and now that is spreading, it is going beyond.
One of the most historic and key parts of Hazur's trip to Canada was when he visited the Canadian Parliament. Hazur was taken to view Leaders' Questions, which is their version of Prime Minister's Questions. And Hazur was seated in the VIP gallery. I was seated just behind. And directly in front of Hazur was Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, and his front bench. And at the end of the session, Hazur observed the session for 15 or 20 minutes. And as it concluded, the Speaker of the House officially recognized Hazur's presence in Parliament.
From the gallery of His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
Later in the day, Hazur then had a personal one-on-one meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada in Justin Trudeau's office. And myself and Mirza Canada were also present during that meeting. In the meeting, the Prime Minister took the opportunity to thank Hazur for his efforts to spread peace in the world and his efforts to spread the peaceful teachings of Islam, the peaceful interpretation of Islam to all parts of the world, and appreciating the fact that he brought that message again to Canada.
Pleasure to welcome His Holiness to Ottawa. The last time we met was a number of years ago, and I didn't yet occupy this office, but we had wonderful conversations, as we will this time, about the Ahmadi community and the challenges they face and the opportunities to work together on promoting love for all and hate for none.
And Hazur actually said to him that at that time, I had a very, very strong feeling when I met you for the first time that one day you will be Prime Minister of Canada, even though at that time you were not your party leader. In fact, you had not even decided whether to stand for the party leadership. Following the one-to-one meeting with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau escorted Hazur to a room further down the corridor opposite his own office, which was a larger room where there was a large round table, and 6 ministers from Trudeau's cabinet were waiting, and also some more members of the Canadian Jamaat also entered the room. And then thereafter, the media were present for a couple of minutes, then the media left the room, and then the doors were shut, and then for about half an hour to 40 minutes, the Prime Minister and his cabinet took the opportunity to ask Hazur questions about Islamic teachings and seek his guidance for their government policy. And you could see that they were taking whatever Hazur was saying extremely seriously. Some of the ministers were taking notes even. And in particular, the one question that they were asking about is how to balance the different freedoms in society, freedom of religion, freedom of belief, and along with other issues such as security of a country.
Canada's decision not to take part in the Iraq war as the right one. And I also agree with your government's decision to halt its airstrikes in Syria until the circumstances of that particular conflict and the means to resolve it become much clearer. At a broader level, the United Nations must also play its role in establishing peace in the world, unencumbered by politics.
So what happened is, I was meant to go back at the end of 4 weeks in Peace Village, and I was ready to go back. I'd packed. Even the Jamaat there had sent stuff for me to take back to London. And around 2 days or 3 days before I was meant to come back, I was waiting outside Hazur's office with many people who wait outside Hazur's office. And I was to the back. Hazur came out and all of a sudden said, when are you going back? I said, in a few days. He said, no, you're not going back. Stay here. Extend your stay. That's all he said. So I didn't know exactly, what I have to do, how I'm supposed to do it. I had a lot of questions in my mind. So I wrote a note to Hazur, and because I was with one of my colleagues from Review of Religions, and I said, Hazur, should he stay as well, or what should I do? And Hazur said, just you stay. That's all he said again. Again, he didn't say exactly what to do. And I was like getting panicked and worrying, what exactly do I have to do? There's a long walk from the mosque to Hazur's residence, and often some office bearers would use that as an opportunity to try and speak to Hazur. Out of respect, we don't just go to Hazur and speak to him. So what I did and what people normally do is, when Hazur is coming down the stairs at the back of the mosque, we stand in a place that Hazur can see you. If Hazur so pleases, then we come forward, and if not, then of course it's up to Hazur. So I stood there, and I had 2-3 questions in my mind, burning questions which I really had to ask. And they'd been burning me for a few days. So when Hazur came down the stairs, he saw me, and all of a sudden, he said, let me guess, you have 3 questions in your mind about this, this, and this. And he said, you're going to ask me this, this, and this. And so I was shocked, because that's exactly what I was going to ask Hazur. And so for a few seconds, I'm walking with Hazur, completely dumbfounded. I couldn't even respond. And I said, Hazur, that's exactly what I was going to ask. And he said, yes, I knew that you were going to ask me that. And he made a joke that I knew you were going to ask me, what is 1 + 1 2?
The second last night, before Hazur left Peace Village, Hazur had returned to his residence after Maghrib and Isha, and around 10 or 10 o'clock, I suddenly heard some loud nare from outside Hazur's residence. And so I went to see what was happening, and I saw that many MDs, local MDs from Peace Village, had congregated outside Hazur's residence. And they started doing nare, calling Hazur to come outside. They all knew, of course, that Hazur was soon departing Peace Village, and they were desperate to have some last opportunities to see him. And so as the minutes passed by, the crowds continued to increase to the point that from a few dozen, it then became a few hundred. And ultimately, it seemed to me as though there was thousands of MDs congregated there. And it was quite a unique scene of the way their chants and their nare continued to get louder and louder. And it was an extremely emotional atmosphere as they were calling Hazur, pleading Hazur to somehow to come out and to see them and to walk amongst them. And as this was taking place, I went back inside to where I was staying, and Hazur had met some of his family members, and I also got to see Hazur for a few moments, and Hazur had heard the nare outside, but Hazur had no intention that evening to go out previously, and even as I talked to him about it and Hazur mentioned that they stood, I had no indication whether Hazur actually planned to come out or not. Anyway, after that I went back outside and I saw the MDs, and with every minute the nare were getting louder and louder, and I remember thinking to myself that I don't know if Hazur's coming. In fact, my own inclination was that perhaps Hazur may not be coming out, but I thought that if he doesn't, they're so charged up and they're so passionate at this moment that they're probably not going to go home and they're going to stay outside all night in the freezing cold. Anyway, just as I was thinking this, at exactly 11 o'clock, even louder and much louder than I could ever have imagined, I heard the loudest nare possible. And then I looked and I saw that the door to Hazur's residence had opened and Hazur had come out. And at that moment I noticed a smile on Hazur's face. And it came to my mind that even though Hazur had heard the nare from inside and the people calling for him to come outside, Hazur had not realized just how many people had congregated.
Nare Takbir! Nare Takbir! Nare Takbir! Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa! Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa!
Hazur was leaving Peace Village. So there was one kid in the crowd who must have been 20. He was joking around. I said, okay, tell me your story. He started telling his story. And then a few seconds in, he said, look, I'll be totally frank with you. I'm not going to lie. I don't even come to the mosque. I don't even do my prayers. But I don't know what it is. Since Hazur came, something's transformed in me. I come 5 times a day now. There's something there about Hazur being here which creates a spirituality. And it has created a spirituality in me. And now, I come 5 times a day for namaz.
By the end of the October, Hazur has very graciously permitted me to accompany his entourage to the western side of Canada. So from Toronto, we flew to Saskatoon.
जब हमारे जमात के जो ज़िम्मेदार अफराद थे 1-2 एयरपोर्ट पर पहुँचे, और जो एयरपोर्ट का जो मेन उनका इंचार्ज होता है, जो पूरे एयरपोर्ट के इंतज़ामात का ज़िम्मेदार होता है, उनसे मिले और उनको बताया कि इस तरह हमारे खलीफा वक्त आ रहे हैं, यहाँ पर आ रहे हैं, तो एयरपोर्ट पे हमें बाद सहूलियात चाहिए, बाद पासिस जारी करें जो हम अंदर आ सकें ताकि हजूर को जहाज़ के करीब रिसीव कर सकें, अंदर फिर हम उनको हजूर को बिठा सकें और अंदर के इंतज़ामात हम देख सकें सारे। तो वो सारी बात सुन के कहने लगा कि मैं ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा पूरी कोशिश भी करूँ तो आपको 5 पास इशू कर दूँगा। फिर इन्होंने बात की पार्किंग की कि हमें पार्किंग भी चाहिए स्पेशल एरिया में, जो कि काफ़िला की गाड़ियाँ होंगी, होलीनेस की है, उसके साथ काफ़िला के मेंबर भी हैं, तो 7-8 गाड़ियों की हमें जगह चाहिए जहाँ पार्किंग हो, जहाँ हजूर एयरपोर्ट से बाहर निकले तो वहाँ करीबी हों ताकि वहाँ कोई और फासला ना तय करना पड़े, गाड़ी में आसानी से बैठ जाएं और वहाँ से रवाना हो जाएं। तो वो बड़ी सोच विचार के बाद कहने लगा कि मैं कोशिश करता हूँ कि आपको कोई जगह दे दूँ। बहरहाल ये सारी उससे बात हुई। तो फिर एक दिन के वक्फा के बाद जिस दिन हजूर ने आना था, सुबह फिर उसे दोबारा मिले कि हम इंतज़ामात फाइनल करना चाहते हैं, आप बताएं आपने क्या सोचा है। तो वो कहने लगा मैंने गौर किया है और मैंने सारा जायज़ा लिया है, तो मैंने आपको 5 पासिस कहा था, आप जितने पासिस मांगते हैं आपको देता हूँ। नाचे उसने बता रहे थे कि कोई 18-19 पासिस जारी किए। तो यहाँ तक वो ले लिए, लोग वहाँ अंदर चले गए, पहुँचे सारे इंतज़ामात के लिए। तो वो कहने लगा कि ये अब मैंने 18 किए थे तो आपके पास ये 3 लोग ज़ायद हैं, ये कौन है? तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये भी हमारी जमात के मेंबर हैं, ये बाहर खड़े रहेंगे। कि बाहर क्यों? मैं इनको भी देता हूँ, ये भी अंदर आ जाए। अच्छा, वो भी अंदर चले गए। उसके बाद कहते हैं 2 मेंबर और आ गए, कहते हैं मैं इनको भी देता हूँ, वो भी अंदर चले गए। चुनाचे उसे 25 पासी जारी कर दिया, हालांकि वो 5 पे अड़ा हुआ था। और वो कहता है, फिर बाद में कहने लगा कि आपने खलीफा वक्त को कहाँ बिठाना है, जहाँ छोटी सी वो पार्लियामेंट के मेंबरान ने इस्तकबाल करना था। वो कहता है कि मैं आपका इंतजाम कर देता हूँ, और एक बड़ी अच्छी खुली जगह पे उसने एक माहौल सा बना के प्राइवेट सा उसने सोफे रख के सारे टेबल रख के उसने मुकम्मल उसने इंतजाम करवा दिया। कहने लगे गाड़ियाँ जो एयरपोर्ट की ख़ास पार्किंग है इंतहाई अहम, वहाँ आप अपनी सारी गाड़ियाँ पार्क करें। मैंने एयरपोर्ट में जो पार्किंग एरिया का इंचार्ज है उसे कह दिया है कि जितनी गाड़ियाँ ये चाहते हैं पार्क करें, इनकी गाड़ी को किसी गाड़ी को आपने ना रोकना है ना कोई टिकट लगानी है। चुनाचे वो इतनी उसके अंदर तब्दीली पैदा हुई कि पहले वो बड़ी मुश्किल से 5 पास देने पर राज़ी हुआ, और पार्किंग के लिए मुश्किलात थी, जगह नहीं मिल रही थी, लेकिन उसने आखिर में कह दिया एयरपोर्ट सारा आपका जो चाहें करें। वो खुद कहता कहता मुझे नहीं समझ आ रही क्या हो रहा है लेकिन यह सब आपका है, आप जो चाहें करें, मुझे नहीं समझ आ रही। तो ये बताता हूँ कि अल्लाह ताला की तरफ से जब दिलों में डालता है, या अल्लाह ताला जब रास्ते खोलता है, तो अगले को भी समझ नहीं आती कि क्या हो रहा है।
The spiritual leader for Ahmadiyya Muslims is the Caliph, who is followed by millions around the world. Today, he made a stop in Saskatoon. Ryan Kessler reports.
The highest-ranking member of the Ahmadiyya faith can draw thousands to any given visit.
In Western Canada, Hazur's first stop was in Saskatoon. And Hazur's very first interview was with a CBC journalist named Devin. This was so unique because after the interview, there was a press conference where he got to ask additional questions. And after, he took it back to his office, published the story, and later that same night came to the Namaz Center. The local Jamaat had rented a large community center during Hazur's visit, and he came there and he said, I'm now off the clock, but I just want to watch him pray. I just want to be in his company for a few more minutes, if I'm permitted. And he stood there and watched Hazur lead namaz.
Every person who come to worship one and omnipotent God, that's welcome. Come here and worship. Even when the people of Najran came to see the Prophet of Islam in Medina, and the time of their prayer came, they were very much disturbed, upset that now the time is passing, where should we pray? The Holy Prophet ﷺ felt it and said, if it is your time, then you can pray in my mosque.
And from there, Hazur went to the capital of the Saskatchewan province, which is Regina. There was an opening ceremony of mosque. They had built a new mosque, and it's a good mosque. Influential people, the politicians, and the civil service was there in the reception. There was a good reception in Regina.
नकद रकम के लिहाज से उसका भी तकरीबन तीसरा हिस्सा 2 अफराद ने अदा करने की जिम्मेदारी ली है, जिनमें से एक हमारे डॉक्टर शमसुल्लाह शहीद की बेवा हैं.
So Hazur mentioned in one of his Friday sermons in Regina about a lady who was a wife of a shaheed who had given 1/3 of the cost of the mosque. So this lady, when I spoke to her afterwards, she told me she had come to Pakistan with absolutely nothing. She had nothing. She's a qualified doctor, by the way. Her qualifications were not, accepted in Canada. She had nothing in her pocket. She had to borrow money from her brother to buy the ticket, which she stressed to me she paid back later. She wanted to stress to me that although I borrowed some money, I paid it back. I didn't actually take anything from anyone. She started from scratch. She had to bring up her kids. She just had a mother to help her. But she said nothing made me frustrated. She said, in fact, the shahadat of my husband gave me resolve, gave me more blessings. And eventually, after many, many years, she got a good job. And eventually, this wife of the shaheed who came with absolutely nothing from Pakistan, was able to contribute 1/3 of the cost of the mosque, Masjid Mahmud in Regina. And in fact, she said, I wished I could have given more.
I remember when Hazur arrived, in Calgary after a flight from Saskatoon. As Hazur came out of the plane, I was stood just a couple of paces behind him. And as Hazur was entering the main airport terminal, suddenly this family came running up to him, just a normal Canadian family, and they said, asked him, "Can we have our photo taken with you? We saw you on Peter Mansbridge, and we want to thank you for the message of peace you're giving, and we're so glad that you're in our country." And then Hazur very graciously, of course, stood and had his photo taken with them, and then they went, and you could see that they were extremely delighted. And then there was some airport staff who also then saw this scene, and they asked Hazur, "Can we have our photos taken with you as well?"
One of the most prominent Muslim leaders on the planet is in Calgary today, and you're going to hear his thoughts on President Trump next. Welcome back. One of the world's most influential Muslim leaders is in Calgary today, and he isn't shying away from last night's election results.
It was perhaps the last day or second last day in Calgary. Hazur was leading some nikahs. He led several nikahs. And he finished leading nikahs. He did the silent prayer. After silent prayer, he called the people who had their nikah to meet them and their parents. Now, towards the very end of people doing musafa with Hazur, there was a young kid. He couldn't have been more than 8. He suddenly got up from the second, third row, and he started heading towards Hazur. So one of the security guards, as he just got close to Hazur, lightly grabbed him, turned him around so his trajectory goes the other way. Private Secretary Saab was sitting in the front line, and I could tell that he could also see that this was just an expression of love. So as the child was going back the other way, back to his seat, the Private Secretary grabbed him, turned him around, and said, "No, you can go to Hazur." And he said to the security guard, "Look, he's not a threat." So just then Hazur had finished, and so the kid comes up. Hazur sees the kid, and Hazur goes, "Is it your nikah as well?" And everyone in the mosque laughed. And Hazur gave him pyar, he gave him a lot of love.
And wherever Hazur went, there was a great welcome. Even they say that the weather is also welcoming Hazur, because this time of weather is very cold, and there is a lot of snow falls during October, November. But this year, the weather was quite warm. It's about 13, 14 degrees centigrade in Calgary, and the people of the Calgary were saying that it's a miracle. They never saw such pleasant weather in their lifetime.
Even the sun is shining for your visit today.
अल्लाह ताला ने अपने खलीफावत के लिए मौसम बदल दिए. मतलब ये जो इलाका है, सस्काटून, रेजिना और कैलगरी और लाइडमिस्टर, ये इस मौसम के लिहाज से बहुत ठंडा इलाका है. बल्कि जब हम टोरंटो में थे अभी, टोरंटो में चूँकि लंबा क़याम था करीबन 28-29 दिन, तो उस दौरान यहाँ पे बर्फ़ पड़ चुकी थी, और सड़कें और सारी सड़कें और सारा इलाका बर्फ़ से भर गया था. और इतनी ठंड थी कि वो बताने वाले बता रहे थे कि जब जिन दिनों में हज़ूर वहाँ पे होंगे, टेम्परेचर -12, -15 होगा. ये बता रहे थे सारे. और इसलिए उसका इंतज़ाम लिबास के लिहाज से, कपड़ों के लिहाज से वहाँ करके पहुँचे. ये टेम्परेचर इतना होगा, इन दिनों में इतना होता है वहाँ पे. तो उस हिसाब से, लेकिन जब जिस दिन हज़ूर रवाना हुए हैं और टोरंटो से, और सस्काटून जब हज़ूर की आमद थी, जो पहला दिन था इस इलाका में, जो सारा ठंडा इलाका है, नॉर्थ की तरफ है, तो या वेस्ट की तरफ आप कह सकते हैं, तो वहाँ पे टेम्परेचर जो था उस दिन वो 12 था, और बिल्कुल हमारे लिहाज से जो देखा जाए तो बाहर का मौसम था. और फिर हज़ूर 13 दिन करीबन वहाँ पे रहे हैं, यानी कि 31 को हज़ूर तशरीफ़ ले गए हैं, 31 अक्टूबर को, और 13 नवंबर को वहाँ से लंदन रवानगी थी. टोटल हम देखें तो 13-14 दिन बनते हैं. 13-14 दिन जो टेम्परेचर है ये 12 से 16 तक रहा, और वो जो -12-15 था वो गायब हो गया, बिल्कुल गायब हो गया. बाहर का मौसम था, और लोग हैरान थे, और सारे लोग वहाँ बातें करते थे. बल्कि बात जो मीडिया वाले आते थे या दूसरे इंटरव्यू लेने वाले आते थे, वो कहते थे कि यहाँ पे खलीफा की बरकत है. यहाँ तो -12-15 टेम्परेचर होता है, और आप +12-15 पे ले आए हैं. तो वो कहते हैं कि वो, बल्कि एक दोस्त हमें मिले, कहने लगे, मैं सारी जमा हम मिल के बैठ के बातें कर रहे हैं कि एक बहुत बड़ा मौजज़ा है. कहते हैं आज, बताने लगे आज 11 नवंबर है, तो मैं पिछले साल का आपको बताता हूँ कि 11 नवंबर को यहाँ -17 टेम्परेचर था. पिछले साल 11 नवंबर को -17 था, अब +16 है उसी डेट को। तो सारी पेशगोइयाँ मैंने बताया ना कि वो अल्लाह ताला के खलीफा की नुसरत थी। खलीफा वक्त की खातर अल्लाह ताला ने सारा मौसम बदल दिया, उनकी सारी पेशगोइयाँ ख़त्म कर दी, हर चीज़ उल्ट हो गई। और वो बताते हैं फिर जो ही दूर वहाँ से रवाना हुए हैं, 13 तारीख को हमारी रवानगी थी, आगे जो फिर 14-15 थी और टेम्परेचर फिर आगे माइनस में चला गया।
On the second last evening of Hazur's tour of Canada, the Jamaat hosted a reception in Calgary, where Hazur gave another amazing address about the true teachings of Islam and shed light on the teachings of the Quran. Before the event, Hazur also held a private meeting with the former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, who also later attended the event. And Hazur also said to him that I'm very pleased to see you today, because it shows that your relationship with our Jamaat was not limited to your term in office, and that this is a sign of friendship. And we as MDs also believe that as time progresses, whether somebody is in office or not is irrelevant, the friendship will continue. And so we are extremely grateful that you're here and our friendship is continuing. Later on, Hazur delivered his address and Stephen Harper was seated next to Hazur. However, beforehand, Stephen Harper had actually said that he would be leaving immediately after Hazur's address because he had some other engagements. However, as dinner was served, Stephen Harper continued to sit with Hazur. And I remember seeing this from where I was seated. Later on, Hazur himself told me that he had mentioned to Stephen Harper that I thought you had to leave, and so if you have to go somewhere, please feel free. But he said that Stephen Harper said to him that I did have some other engagements, but I do not want to waste this opportunity to sit with you and to seek your guidance and to talk to you. And I'm ready to stay all evening if I have this opportunity.
Your Holiness, it has been a particular honor and pleasure to meet with you once again. And I would want to use my brief remarks to tell you about the remarkable Ahmadiyya Muslim community of this city and of Canada. Throughout my term as Prime Minister, this community, your community, was among one of the best partners that we ever worked with.
Following the conclusion of the event, Hazur then held a meeting with a group of members of the Indigenous community of Canada. It was a very interesting meeting. As Hazur entered the room, they all rose and stood up, some of their elder people, some of their younger people, men, women, and children. And they started chanting, and they did some sort of smoke of some sort of incense, set it alight. I'm still not quite sure what it was, but it was quite a moving experience actually, just to listen to it and to be present in it. And Hazur stood very respectfully and listened to their welcome. Later on, I was actually informed that this is the highest form of welcome that can be given by the Indigenous community to any person, and is only given to the most respected people.
Without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help and support, a human cannot be so perfect in every sense, in the way he deals with people, in the way that he performs his duties, his worship, his work.
What surprised me and what confused me is Hazur's time management. I can't understand how Hazur is managing his time. He has also the same 24 hours which we have, but and there was a difference of time zone, and there was a difference of, they say, jet lag. But I never felt any disturbance on his face. He was always very smiling and very welcoming.
And in the entire 6 weeks, there wasn't a single day where Hazur went out for sightseeing even. I often would pray, seeing Hazur's schedule, that Hazur would take some time off, but Hazur did not take any time off. There was talk for a few days in Peace Village that there was some time free, and they may propose to Hazur to take him somewhere for sightseeing in parts of Canada where there's places of natural beauty. But then Hazur decided that those days, if there was any time free, should be filled up with more mulaqats.
And there were a few nights where Hazur walked the streets of Peace Village, and the atmosphere was absolutely electric. Members who had come from London Markaz had said, we have never witnessed such an exciting euphoria in the streets, and all Ahmadis have gathered out on the streets, that it reminded them of something they would have witnessed in either Rabwa or Qadian. It was those precious moments that we hope that we're able to cherish with us. And we eagerly await our beloved Imam to come back to Canada and breath that life back into us, that excitement, that spiritual journey that we went on for 6 weeks.
खिलाफत बिना अब नहीं है गुजारा खिलाफत के बाद